Greetings, everyone. My name is Andrew Craig, and this is my behaviorist biography on Saul Axelrod. Saul Axelrod was professor of education and applied behavior analysis at Temple University from 1972 to 2011. He received his PhD in disability studies from Florida State University in 1970, and then continued on to a fellowship in applied behavior analysis at University of Kansas. Despite retiring from Temple, he is still active in the field as of 2018 with multiple publications. His career mainly focused on advancing the theoretical understanding of applied behavior analysis and advocating for the importance of further use and implementation of behavior analysis principles, interventions, strategies, and practices in other disciplines. The two main disciplines focused on were special education and general education. Axelrod's 40-plus year career spanned many subjects and publication types, but you can find different patterns in his career that break down into three distinct categories, the grand majority of which focus on general or special education practices. These three categories are theory and practice shaping call to action articles, advocating for change in ABA and its integration into disciplines like education. The second is literature reviews and meta-analyses of common ABA practices, and the third are educator and practitioner instructional book publications. This first section is called Call to Action. I call these Call to Action because Axelrod is largely advocating for ABA and its use in other disciplines, while also calling for change to break down the barriers in those disciplines that prevent it. So these two articles really focus on those barriers. The 1993 article is a more general sense of what is holding back ABA from being accepted by the general public, whereas the 1990 article is focusing more on why teachers have a hard time accepting and then using behavior modification procedures. A lot of this is focused on, actually for teachers, is that they perceive it as adding something extra to what they're doing, and oftentimes that can provide resistance to that. The 1993 article here provides some answers to those questions. So in integrating behavior technology into public schools, Axelrod suggests that the key is to actually integrating ABA principles and practices into the curriculum. So making those interventions, those strategies, part of what the teacher is teaching and doing on a daily basis more seamlessly and being the bedrock of those best practices. I also did an article that was a review, looking at how people were addressing IDIA's emphasis on the increase in use of behavioral strategies, such as using functional behavior analysis, to discern whether behavior problems are at play when looking at learning disabilities. The second section of contribution to the literature is on these literature reviews and meta-analyses. This first article, Autism and Beyond, Axelrod and colleagues focus on taking a look at ABA research and how it was narrowing its focus on autism. They were finding that this was the major subject in so many publications, that ABA's use with autism, and that the field was neglecting other general problems where ABA can be effective. So the suggestion here was to broaden the field's focus, not just to its use with autism, but other areas. The second article here, Axelrod did a review of token reinforcement programs in special education classes. What was interesting here is he found that there was effectiveness across multiple studies focusing on different disabilities and different problem behaviors. So token reinforcement was shown to be effective across all those situations. Axelrod focused on integrating peer tutoring and cooperative learning strategies into education. as a major focus in his career. These were two studies where he was reviewing those practices. Um, he talks about the proper. He was taking a look at how these were being executed and how effective they were. Effectiveness is found, but oftentimes implementation could sometimes vary, and that not always as much cooperative learning and peer tutoring can oftentimes suffer in quality. He also did a paper on overcorrection, in which it looked at the effects of overcorrection. This might seem like an outlier in his career, but in fact, this was another area of interest of Axelrod, focusing on punishment, the effects of punishment. The third contribution to literature section is on books. Was a part of many different instructional texts to teach teachers or educators and practitioners. He was involved with 2 editions of behavior modification for classroom teachers. He was a part of a book series called How to Improve Classroom Behavior, and he did 2 books on his own in that series, and he co-authored a third one in the series. He also co-authored a 3rd edition of a general behavior modification text, and he published a book. He co-authored a book of the effects of punishment on human behavior. This is a book chapter that is a good example of some of the work he did within those books. So this chapter, dealing with classroom management problems, focuses on explaining positive reinforcement and how it can be used in the classroom, including tips for how to determine what makes a good reinforcer. He gives a few concrete examples of successful attempts by teachers, and he gives 8 tips or guidelines for how to solve problems in the classroom constructively. These are my interview questions for him. The first 2 focus on his look at the future of ABA and being integrated into education. So the first question is, what are the major advances in the field of education or special education with regards to implementing ABA practices? And then the second question, conversely, what are some of the remaining downfalls or blind spots of educators and school systems in using ABA today? The third question focuses on the Autism and Beyond article, where they're claiming that ABA was too much narrowing its focus on autism. So after 8 years, has this tendency become even more true? And what are the most neglected problems in which ABA could provide effective solutions? Fourth question is I have a particular interest in how ABA can be used with children or students with ADHD or simply exhibit significant problems with attention or hyperactivity. There seems to be a lack of resources beyond medication here. What are some of the ways ABA can be effective in addressing ADHD or significant related problem behaviors? Question 5. You were involved in the writing and editing of many book publications. What was your favorite project of these to work on? So here are the implications for Axelrod's career. He was a major advocate for the use and integration of ABA practices and principles. And he also advocated that for many disciplines, especially education, doing this integration is crucial for best practices and effectiveness of the discipline. He also focused on ABA's acceptance and that it has many barriers. He was working to break those barriers to allow for the implementation he had been suggesting. He also wanted to refine the common practices that had gained acceptance in the different fields and ensure that implementation was appropriate and in fact effective. He provided educators and practitioners with the ABA tools himself and others prescribed through the book contributions. He became became a leader for shaping ABA theory and practice, and an advocate for, an example for the growing acceptance and implementation of ABA in education. These are my references for this.